So Right Wing Watch went to the Values Voters Summit and got some speeches. Instead of doing what I normally do, where I just play the whole thing and then talk about, I'm gonna play a speech and then talk about. There were three speeches. The first one's by Roy Moore, who's a Senate candidate right now. The second one is I don't know. I feel like I should know, but I don't. And the third one's Michelle Bachmann, who's a former congresswoman and has a radio show by conservative Christian standards. It's doing pretty good. By the standards of something that's actually doing good, it's not doing good. So let's watch. We'll start off with Roy Moore, who looks a little different than the last time we saw him. If you don't know who Roy Moore is, he's currently the nominee for Alabama Senate race to fill Jeff Sessions' seat. He's basically a theocrat. He was actually kicked out of state senate because he wanted 10 commandments on public buildings. So let's watch.
A lot of people think that what I stand for is religious. They ask me, well, what's all this talk about God? Don't you know God's not acceptable in this system of
Love the
political
pause there,
arena? Well, I'm going to tell you, when you forget God, you can forget politics. When you forget God, you forget, just like it says, your heritage, your rights, your freedoms. For me, it's a question of freedom or slavery. This is an awful moment for our country. Should I keep back my opinions at such a time as this, I would consider myself guilty of treason toward my country and an act of disloyalty toward the majesty of heaven, which I revere above all earthly kings.
Oh.
We've got to go back to God. We've got to go back to the Constitution.
And you know, my friend.
Okay. So that was Roy Moore. He wants us to go back to God and the Constitution. I've never heard a bigger oxymoron, considering how the Constitution creates a separation between church and state. And don't get me wrong, you can believe all of this. That's perfectly fine. You can believe in God. I don't, but you can. You just can't enforce it on anyone. That's how it works. But yeah, and for that matter, when we forget God, we forget our freedoms. Okay, well, the Bible kind of doesn't like some freedoms. There are slaves in the Old Testament, Roy Moore. Okay, but, you know, that was the times, I'll admit. Although I think a holy book should be held to a higher standard than just, what you gonna do? It was the times. But the Bible also condemns eating shellfish and wearing a mix of two different fabrics. I'm not making that up. Okay, let's continue. And then this is the second guy. Looking at him, I think he's something Reed, although I don't know for sure. I feel like I've seen him before. I don't know who he is, though. Comment below if you know who he is. Please tell me.
Friends, the attack isn't just on the football field. It's we're also seeing the left now turn into an American Taliban declaring war on our monuments. I don't know if you remember this, but it didn't start with Southern memorials. It started with the Ten Commandments. Last couple of decades, we've seen left-wing groups file lawsuits all over America forcing the Ten Commandments, plaques, and monuments to be taken down from courthouses and schools in state after state after state.
Oh, God. Okay, first off, he calls the left the American Taliban. The secular left is comparable to Muslim extremist theocrats. Okay. Now, don't get me wrong, I think even calling these people like the Christian Taliban is a little extremist because they're not out there beheading people like the Taliban and ISIS are. So I don't consider them on that level. I don't think they're actually dangerous. I think they're wrong and I think they're stupid, but I don't think they're dangerous. But okay. And for that matter, he says it started with the Ten Commandments. Again, separation of church and state. Or are the groups who did that evil and responsible for 9/11? I'm not making that up. That was something I think Falwell said about that time. He said on, I think, 700 Club that ACLU, which is one of the groups that does things like that, was responsible for 9/11. But leftists are extreme by saying that I don't think that's true. Okay. And then he talks about the removal of statues. First off, Robert E. Lee didn't want statues. Second off, he lost. Robert E. Lee surrendered to Ulysses S. Grant. It's not even like he fought until the bitter end. No, he surrendered. He committed treason against the Confederacy. And these are, I feel Southern pride for someone who committed treason. Wow. And the last person is Bachman. If you don't know her, she's a congresswoman. She ran for president in 2012. She was one of the leaders of like the Tea Party movement back when that was still a thing, which really only still exists through like the 30 or so House members in the Freedom Caucus. Let's watch her.
Salvation is free. It is a way to come back to God. We do nothing for it. In fact, it is wrong theology you hold. If you think that at the end of your life, that life is made up of a pan balance, and if you did more good things than bad things, that somehow that will get you into heaven, I'm sorry to say you'll be tragically mistaken on that final day. There's only one way that you go into heaven, and that is receiving and believing that it is God who saved your sins and that he is who he says he is. You know, the remarkable thing, when you read the Bible, every archaeology find that's ever come forward has only proved the authenticity of the Bible.
What?
People who do not receive this free gift, there will be a place called hell, and hell lasts just as long as heaven. And so it is my prayer and my wish, as I think it is many of yours, that every person in this room would make a decision today about where they will be for all of eternity, whether it be heaven or whether it be hell.
What? Okay, I ended up laughing over most of that speech. You didn't miss anything. It was typical believe in God or go to hell talking points that you expect from these types of people. What I was bursting out laughing at, though, was archaeologists believe the Bible's claims. No, they don't. Most scientists are atheists, first off. But second off, what? I mean, the Bible was written pre-science. Even if you are a Christian, even if you believe God wrote it himself and just one day it came down upon man, and then God said, share this book. Oh, by the way, when my son is born, write some more. Then, okay. However, what? There are parts of the Bible that say the world is flat, or at least allude to the world being flat. There are parts of the Bible where it says the earth has four corners. Like, it's a rectangle that's flat. There are parts of the Bible that say disease is caused by demons. We know that's not true. We know it's bacteria. Etc., etc., etc. And the rest is just typical, preaching talking points. But what makes this sad is this was a political event. This wasn't like they stuck into a church. Because if they stuck into a church or something, I think that'd be a little rude. Just some church out there with 30 people. This is an entire group meeting of Alabama Republicans. This is what the religious right that we thought was all dead is coming up to. And through people like Roy Moore and Mike Pence, they're coming back with a vengeance. Wow. I'm Ephrom, and good night.